Section number 18 of Essays of Schopenhauer. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kendra Hurst. Essays of Schopenhauer by Arthur Schopenhauer. Translated by Sarah Hay Dirks. Psychological Observations, Part 2. Why is common an expression of contempt? And why are uncommon, extraordinary, distinguished expressions of approbation? Why is everything that is common contemptible? Common, in its original sense, means that which is peculiar and common to the whole species. That is to say, that which is innate in the species. Accordingly, a man who has no more qualities than those of the human species in general is a common man. Ordinary man is a much milder expression, and is used more in reference to what is intellectual, while common is used more in a moral sense. What value can a being have that is nothing more than like millions of its kind? Millions? Nay, an infinitude. An endless number of beings which nature in secula seculorum unceasingly sends bubbling forth from her inexhaustible source, as generous with them as the smith with the dross that flies around his anvil. So it is evidently only right that a being which has no other qualities than those of the species should make no claim to any other existence than that confined to and conditioned by the species. I have already several times explained that whilst animals have only the generic character, it falls to man's share alone to have an individual character. Nevertheless, in most men there is in reality very little individual character, and they may be almost all classified. Ce sont des espèces. Their desires and thoughts, like their faces, are those of the whole species, at any rate those of the class of men to which they belong, and they are therefore of a trivial, common nature, and exist in thousands. Moreover, as a rule, one can tell pretty exactly beforehand what they will say and do. They have no individual stamp. They are like manufactured goods. If, then, their nature is absorbed in that of the species, must not their existence be too? The curse of vulgarity reduces man to the level of animals, for his nature and existence are merged in that of the species only. It is taken for granted that anything that is high, great, or noble, by its very nature, stands isolated in a world where no better expression can be found to signify what is base and paltry than the term which I have mentioned as being generally used, namely common. According as our intellectual energy is strained or relaxed, will life appear to us either short, petty, and fleeting, that nothing can happen of sufficient importance to affect our feelings. Nothing is of any importance to us, be it pleasure, riches, or even fame, and however much we have failed, we cannot have lost much, or vice versa. Life will appear so long, so important, so all in all, so grave, and so difficult that we throw ourselves into it with our whole soul, so that we may get a share of its possessions, make ourselves sure of its prizes, and carry out our plans. The latter is the imminent view of life. It is what Gracian means by his expression, tomar muy de veras el vivre. Life is to be taken seriously. While the former, the transcendental view, Ovid's non est tanti is a good expression, Plato's a still better. Nihil in rebus humanis magno studio dignum est. The former state of mind is the result of the intellect having gained ascendancy over consciousness, where, freed from the mere service of the will, it grasps the phenomenon of life objectively, and so cannot fail to see clearly the emptiness and futility of it. On the other hand, it is the will that rules another condition of mind, and it is only there to lighten the way to the object of its desires. A man is great or small according to the predominance of one or the other of these views of life. It is quite certain that many a man owes his life's happiness solely to the circumstance that he possesses a pleasant smile, and so wins the hearts of others. However, these hearts would do better to take care to remember what Hamlet put down in his tablets, that one may smile and be a villain. People of great and brilliant capacities think little of admitting or exposing their faults and weaknesses. They regard them as something for which they have paid, and even are of the opinion that these weaknesses, instead of being a disgrace to them, do them honor. This is especially the case when they are heirs that are inseparable from their brilliant capacities. Condition sine quibus non, or as George Sand expressed it, chacun a les défenses de ses vertus. On the contrary, there are people of good character and irreproachable minds who, rather than admit their few little weaknesses, carefully conceal them, and are very sensitive if any reference is made to them, and this just because their whole merit consists in the absence of errors and defects. And hence when these errors come to light, they are immediately held in less esteem. Modesty, in people of moderate ability, is merely honesty, but in people of great talent it is hypocrisy. Hence it is just as becoming in the latter to openly admit the regard they have for themselves, and not to conceal the fact that they are conscious of possessing exceptional capabilities, as it is in the former to be modest. Valerius Maximus gives some very good examples of this in his chapter De Fiducia Sui. Man even surpasses all the lower order of animals in his capacity for being trained. Mohammedans are trained to pray 5 times a day with their faces turned towards Mecca, and they do it regularly. Christians are trained to make the sign of the cross on certain occasions, and to bow and so forth, so that religion on the whole is a real masterpiece of training. That is to say, it trains people what they are to think, and the training, as is well known, cannot begin too early. There is no absurdity, however palpable it may be, which may not be fixed in the minds of all men, if it is inculcated before they are 6 years old by continual and earnest repetition. For it is the same with men as with animals. To train them with perfect success, one must begin when they are very young. Noblemen are trained to regard nothing more sacred than their word of honor, to believe earnestly, rigidly, and firmly in the inane code of knight errantry, and if necessary, to seal their belief by death, and to look upon a king as a being of a higher order. Politeness and compliments, and particularly our courteous attitude towards ladies, are the result of training, and so is our esteem for birth, position, and title. And so is our displeasure at certain expressions directed against us, our displeasure being proportionate to the expression used. The Englishman has been trained to consider his being called no gentleman a crime worthy of death, a liar a still greater crime. And so the Frenchman, if he is called a coward, a German, if he is called stupid. Many people are trained to be honest in some particular direction, whilst in everything else they exhibit very little honesty, so that many a man will not steal money, but he will steal everything that will afford him enjoyment in an indirect way. Many a shopkeeper will deceive without scruple, but he will on no condition whatever steal. The doctor sees mankind in all its weakness, the lawyer in all its wickedness, the theologian in all its stupidity. Opinion obeys the same law as the swing of the pendulum. If it goes beyond the center of gravity on one side, it must go as far beyond on the other. It is only after a time that it finds the true point of rest and remains stationary. Distance in space decreases the size of things, for it contracts them and makes their defects and deficiencies disappear. This is why everything looks so much finer in a contracting mirror, or in a camera obscura, than it is in reality, and the past is affected in the same way in the course of time. The scenes and events that happened long ago, as well as the persons who took part in them, become a delight to the memory, which ignores everything that is immaterial and disagreeable. The present poses no such advantage. It always seems to be defective. And in space, small objects near at hand appear to be big, and if they are very near, they cover the whole field of our vision. But as soon as we stand some little distance away, they become minute and finally invisible. And so it is with time. The little affairs and misfortunes of everyday life excite in us emotion, anxiety, vexation, passion. For so long as they are quite near us, they appear big, important, and considerable. But as soon as the inexhaustible stream of time has carried them into the distance, they become unimportant. They are not worth remembering and are soon forgotten, because their importance merely consisted in being near. It is only now and then that a man learns something, but he forgets the whole day long. Our memory is like a sieve, that with time and use holds less and less, insofar, namely, as the older we get, the quicker anything we have entrusted to our memory slips through it, while anything that was fixed firmly in it when we were young remains. This is why an old man's recollections are the clearer the further they go back, and the less clear the nearer they approach the present, so that his memory, like his eyes, becomes long-sighted. That sometimes, and apparently without any reason, long-forgotten scenes suddenly come to the memory is, in many cases, due to the recurrence of a scarcely perceptible odor, of which we were conscious when those scenes actually took place. For it is well known that odors more easily than anything else awaken memories, and that, in general, something of an extremely trifling nature is all that is necessary to wake up a nexus idearum. And by the way, I may say that the sense of sight has to do with the understanding, the sense of hearing with reason, and the sense of smell with memory, as we see in the present case. Touch and taste are something real, and dependent on contact. They have no ideal side. Memory has also this peculiarity attached to it, that a slight state of intoxication very often enhances the remembrance of past times and scenes, whereby all the circumstances connected with them are recalled more distinctly than they could be in a state of sobriety. On the other hand, the recollection of what one said or did while in a state of intoxication is less clear than usual. Nay, one does not recollect at all if one has been very drunk. Therefore, intoxication enhances one's recollection of the past, while, on the other hand, one remembers little of the present while in that state. That arithmetic is the basest of all mental activities is proved by the fact that it is the only one that can be accomplished by means of a machine. Take, for instance, the reckoning machines that are so commonly used in England at the present time, and solely for the sake of convenience. But all analysis finitorum et infinitorum is fundamentally based on calculation. Therefore, we may gauge the profound sense of the mathematician, of whom Lichtenberg has made fun, in that he says, "These so-called professors of mathematics have taken advantage of the ingeniuses of other people, have attained the credit of possessing profound sense, which strongly resembles the theologians' profound sense of their own holiness." As a rule, people of very great capacities will get on better with a man of extremely limited intelligence than with a man of ordinary intelligence, and it is for the same reason that the despot and the plebeians, the grandparents and the grandchildren, are natural allies. I am not surprised that people are bored when they are alone. They cannot laugh when they are alone, for such a thing seems foolish to them. Is laughter, then, to be regarded as merely a signal for others, a mere sign, like a word? It is a want of imagination and dullness of mind generally, as Theophrastus puts it, that prevents people from laughing when they are alone. The lower animals neither laugh when they are alone nor in company. Neeson, the misanthropist, was surprised as he was laughing to himself by one of these people, who asked him why he laughed when he was alone. "That is just why I was laughing," was the answer. People who do not go to the theatre are like those who make their toilet without a looking-glass. But it is still worse to come to a decision without seeking the advice of a friend. For a man may have the most correct and excellent judgment in everything else but in his own affairs, because here the will at once deranges the intellect. Therefore a man should seek counsel. A doctor can cure everyone but himself. This is why he calls a colleague in when he is ill. The natural gesticulation of everyday life, such as accompanies any kind of lively conversation, is a language of its own, and, moreover, is much more universal than the language of words, so far as it is independent of words, and the same in all nations, although each nation makes use of gesticulation in proportion to its vivacity, and in individual nations, the Italian, for instance, it is supplemented by some few gesticulations which are merely conventional, and have therefore only local value. Its universal use is analogous to logic and grammar, since it expresses the form and not the matter of conversation. However, it is to be distinguished from them, since it has not only an intellectual relation, but also a moral, that is, it defines the movements of the will. And so it accompanies conversation, just as a correctly progressive bass accompanies a melody, and serves in the same way to enhance the effect. The most interesting fact about gesticulation is that as soon as conversation assumes the same form, there is a repetition of the same gesture. This is the case, however varied the matter, that is to say, the subject matter, may be. So that I am able to understand quite well the general nature of a conversation, in other words, the mere form and type of it, while looking out of a window, without hearing a word spoken. It is unmistakably evident that the speaker is arguing, advancing his reasons, then modifying them, then urging them, and drawing his conclusion in triumph. Or it may be he is relating some wrong that he has suffered, plainly depicting in strong and condemnatory language the stupidity and stubbornness of his opponents. Or he is speaking of the splendid plan he has thought out and put in execution, explaining how it became a success, or perhaps failed because fate was unfavorable. Or perhaps he is confessing that he was powerless to act in the matter in question, or recounting that he noticed and saw through, in good time, the evil schemes that had been organized against him, and by asserting his rights or using force, frustrated them and punished their author, and 100 other things of a similar kind. But what gesticulation alone really conveys to me is the essential matter, be it of a moral or intellectual nature, of the whole conversation in abstracto. That is to say, the quintessence, the true substance of the conversation, remains identical whatever has brought about the conversation, and consequently whatever the subject matter of it may be. The most interesting and amusing part of this matter, as has been said, is the complete identity of the gestures for denoting the same kind of circumstances, even if they are used by most diverse people, just as the words of a language are alike for every one, and liable to such modifications as are brought about by a slight difference in accent or education. And yet these standing forms of gesticulation, which are universally observed, are certainly the outcome of no convention. They are natural and original, a true language of nature, which may have been strengthened by imitation and custom. It is incumbent on an actor, as is well known, and on a public speaker to a less extent, to make a careful study of gesture, a study which must principally consist in the observation and imitation of others, for the matter cannot very well be based on abstract rules, with the exception of some quite general leading principles. As, for instance, that the gesture must not follow the word, but rather immediately precede it, in order to announce it, and thereby rouse attention. The English have a peculiar contempt for gesticulation, and regard it as something undignified and common. This seems to me to be only one of those silly prejudices of English fastidiousness, for it is a language which nature has given to everyone, and which everyone understands. Therefore, to abolish and forbid it for no other reason than to gratify that so much extolled, gentlemanly feeling is a very dubious thing to do. The state of human happiness, for the most part, is like certain groups of trees, which seen from a distance look wonderfully fine, but if we go up to them and among them, their beauty disappears. We do not know wherein it lay, for it is only trees that surround us, and so it happens that we often envy the position of others. End of section 18. Recording by Kendra Hurst.